Hello, everyone. Welcome to the August 4th SIMBA Chain webinar. We're glad you could join us. We've had quite a bit of a sign up and an attendance on for this event. So with great anticipation, we are going to start. So you regulars will know me. I'm Anjan Roy. I will be moderating today's webinar. I'm also going to be a panelist because our approach is going to be a little bit different today than it is normally. We're going to be talking about blockchain and best practices and trends and approaches like in education in general, and that includes training and development, university and higher education and whatnot. Joining me is going to be our usual panelist that you all know well, Tommy Cooksey. He's our SIMBA Chain master trainer and blockchain architect, and he'll be sharing some of his experience as a blockchain trainer. And for the first time, we're going to have David Wasson. And for those of you in the education sector, you very well might know David. He's our education practice lead here at SIMBA Chain. And we have very special guests. We are honored to have from Portland State University, Dr. Christy Yuthis and Stanton Heister will hopefully be joining us momentarily. And they're going to be sharing their experiences on teaching blockchain to their students over at Portland State University. So as always, we're going to be keeping questions for the end. We may take a highly relevant question intermittently, but in general, we'd like to keep questions for the end, and we're going to be leaving, as always, a good stable of time at the end so we can get to your important questions, and you can put those over on the chat line. So with that, I'm gonna get things started right now, and because I'm also a panelist today, I get to play both. And so blockchain education and training. So a couple of topics, we're going to talk about. I'm going to talk about, what we call a knowledge transfer approach to blockchain and education and why that's relevant. This approach on the knowledge transfer approach driven by the legendary Japanese professor Hiroko Nonaka, why that's relevant to blockchain. Tommy's going to talk about some of the a particular case study and some of his experience and opportunities he's seen with work in the education sector. And of course, we're going to have a case study from Portland State University on what their experiences are in teaching blockchain. So what is a knowledge transfer approach? Well, first, let's just step back for a moment and say, what's a big challenge of blockchain, of learning and teaching blockchain? Well, it goes without saying, it's hard, okay? It's hard for all but the most technical learners. That's why blockchain, particularly those who are practicing it at the implementation level, those who are most kind of versant on it and most experienced with it, they tend to overwhelmingly be very technical. Not just technical developers who know how to code, but those who know how to do it in blockchain. And because for outside of that, it's hard because of various reasons that we're going to get to in a moment. It's hard. And why is that a problem that blockchain is hard for all but the most technical learners? It's particularly a problem because if blockchain is going to succeed, and if it's going to have the type of impact that it has the potential to have, it's critical that we get professionals that are fluent from a variety of sectors and a variety of disciplines learned on, getting them to become experienced and experts on blockchain. The sector needs it, yet the way it's designed right now in its current state of maturity, you have to be very technical to learn it, or at least being really technical gives you a big advantage. And why? So how do we tackle this problem? Well, a couple things to come up with a plan to tackle this problem and tackle this challenge. Let's look at a couple of characteristics of blockchain. It's complex and abstract, first of all. Blockchain, even within technology, you are mixing discipline. You're taking various different concepts, like obviously the append-only ledger that we know about. You're bringing in hashing. You're bringing in encryption. You're bringing in consensus algorithms. You're fusing that whole thing into a decentralized database, just to name a few. And that's not even talking about some of the broader properties and parts of the blockchain ecosystem. If you get into wallets and you get into off-chaining, not even to go into that, but just even the core aspects of blockchain melds existing technologies and concepts, which makes it difficult. And those existing pieces are themselves complex. And so you take all these things, and what you see is it's very hard to paint a concrete picture. It's abstract. This leads to specialization. Now, the other point I want to make here is that blockchain is also hyper collaborative. And that's really important here, because I highlighted that because in some ways, it's the hyper collaborative nature of blockchain driven by its core, or one of its core properties, that being decentralization. What that means is you need personnel, multiple personnel, sometimes across organizations and even across sectors and even many sectors and organizations to really realize the potential for blockchain. And that makes it unique in a way that other disciplines that are also abstract and complex and specialized, even within technology, or other, or even outside of technology, other analytically intensive disciplines, theoretical physics is also very complex and very abstract, but it doesn't have the hyper collaborative properties. Artificial intelligence neural networks, also very abstract, very complex, very specialized, but all of them can still succeed without necessarily being hyper collaborative. Whereas blockchain, for blockchain to succeed, you have to be hyper collaborative. And that is both an opportunity as well as a problem that has to be addressed. And of course, along with being hyper collaborative, it's being utilized across disciplines and sectors and requires multidisciplinary approaches. And all of those are similar to being hyper collaborative. And then finally, on top of all that, it's a skill. If you're in a university or you're in a training department at a company, you probably know this very well. It's an in-demand skill. We've seen some of the latest numbers coming out of LinkedIn and Indeed, the job posting sites, some of the, studies of the labor market that, job postings for blockchain have actually continued to rise even in a massive economic downturn that we've had with, with the COVID crisis. The numbers are still going up, which is shocking, but it shows the type of strength and appetite and demand there is for people that are skilled in blockchain. So with all of that, what should we prepare for, if you're in either a training development or in the education sector for blockchain? And the important takeaway here is that there's both a push and a pull when it comes to taking this multidisciplinary approach. The push on one hand is 70% of your blockchain students in universities that are either planning to take blockchain or doing so now are coming from outside of the computer science department, the latest Coinbase survey. And then the other side, on the pull side, you've got industry saying that right now, the industry is talking about the need to reverse what they call the 80-20 ratio. And Gartner and McKinsey has talked about this. And they say that right now, blockchain conversations are 80% dominated by technology specialists and even hyper specialists. They're really blockchain technology hyper specialists. And about 20% are coming from the business or the domain or subject matter side. For blockchain to really scale and make the impact that it has the potential of doing, that 80-20 has to be reversed. So this multidisciplinary hyper collaborative approach is, you're seeing that demand come from the push side as well as the pull side from industry. So how do you address this? Knowing that this is what we're up against, knowing that this is what blockchain is. Well, I think it is helpful to look at going back to a concept from the legendary Japanese management professor Hiroko Nonaka, and a concept he came up with back in the late 80s and early 90s. He called it the Nonaka knowledge spiral. And there's a lot we could talk about the knowledge spiral, but the most important thing on the knowledge spiral, and the real takeaway for that, especially for those who are in these complex disciplines, is the importance of tacit knowledge. Now, what is tacit knowledge? Tacit knowledge is the non-codified, non-explicit knowledge that's not going to be written down in a textbook or delivered through, as much through lecture or notes. It's knowledge that exists inside people. And tacit knowledge itself is driven by internalization and socialization. And so for tacit knowledge, it can be, and beyond that, existing within people, it also exists within processes and interactions and relationships between people, within organizations, or even across organizations, which of course is very relevant to blockchain. And it's important to emphasize, tacit knowledge here, because it's particularly relevant when you're talking about contexts that are abstract, that are complex, and that are collaborative. By the way, all of those, as we know, are properties and challenges of blockchain and the blockchain discipline. It is abstract, it's complex and collaborative, and tacit knowledge is really important. Now, this is not to say that tacit knowledge is a replacement for explicit knowledge, and that is a misinterpretation that some make when they and sometimes followers of and disciples of Nonaka's knowledge spiral have taken that approach. And this would be very clear. This is not a replacement for them. This is rather an extension of, an augmentation of, a complement to traditional explicit knowledge, which is still the starting point, the best place to start. But the point is, how do you take it to the next level? How do you have your learners have the type of impact in the community, have the type of impact that you really want them to have? And to do that, you need to develop the tacit knowledge. And so how do you develop tacit knowledge? Well, we could write theses on this, and many have. And it's not the easiest thing, but it is simple. And the simple is really two. One is you need usage and action. You need people to do it. It's not something that you learn exclusively from a textbook. It's something that has to be done in addition to the textbook, and that's to do it. Practical application. And the other part is interpersonal interactions. It needs to be collaborative. You need to have people talk about it. It needs to have planned projects. It needs to have, serendipity. It needs to, it's not something that you can develop socialization and tacit knowledge driven by socialization. It's not something that happens exclusively by sitting in the basement by yourself. It needs something beyond that. It needs collaboration. So, I think the real takeaway from all this is if you're in a university or a training department or anyone, responsible for the learning and teaching and scaling of that learning and teaching and knowledge of blockchain, you need to make sure that tacit knowledge complements your explicit knowledge, and you drive it by socialization and internalization, which is really action, usage, and interpersonal interaction. That's if you take nothing away, take that away. And with that, I'm going to take a breath and also pass things off to my colleague and friend, Tommy Cooksey. Tommy, all yours.
Great. Thank you very much, Anjan. I really appreciate that introduction. And, that's something that I often say in training is, if you hear something, you forget it. If you see it, you remember it. But if you do it, you understand it. And the nice thing about SIMBA Chain is we take these very advanced technologies, this blockchain tech that sometimes is really hard to grasp, and we try to make it simple. It's simple blockchain application. That's in our name, and so that's our key factor is that we try to make these technologies easily adaptable. And so with that being said, let's go ahead and take a look at the next slide here. But my name is Tommy Cooksey. I'm a trainer here at SIMBA Chain, and we were actually doing a presentation at a local college for me at IUPUI. I'm in Indianapolis, and IUPUI is a local college, Indiana University, Purdue University at Indianapolis. And we were doing a joint venture with Rolls-Royce and Dow Chemical along with SIMBA Chain to do predictive analytics on things like that could possibly happen within the supply chain and how that could affect, downrange supply of particular products. And so as part of that presentation, I was actually approached by some of the professors there to see how we could possibly integrate some blockchain technology into their existing educational platforms. And so as part of that, let's go ahead and take a look at the next slide here. As part of that, what I did is I kind of took a look at the traditional three-tier web architecture. And so this may be a little bit techy for some of you, but generally speaking, what this shows is it just shows that when you communicate with a web app, you communicate with a front-end server, and then that usually has to send data to some analytics server in the middle tier. And then on the back end, you have some place that stores that information, and it has some persistence. And so generally speaking, that information for the persistence was on a database or possibly even a ledger, but it was a centralized ledger. And so what we're looking at with the blockchain is looking and getting away from what we're all used to with credits and debits, but now we're adding in a triple entry ledger, right? So we have triple entry accounting, and that adds the blockchain aspect of it with the encryption and the signatures in that additional entry. That additional entry is a cryptographic hash for that transaction. So it proves the validity of the inputs. And so with that being said, we can see that a blockchain can be used with anything. Everybody's going to be affected. So you can think of it like, the train is coming, and you have to figure out, are you going to be able to adapt to this or not? And how are you going to easily adapt to it? Are you a tech person, or are you not a tech person? If you're not, then maybe you just need a way to easily adapt the value that you have in your data, and then figure out how you're going to distribute that value. So, so that's what I'm trying to show in this particular model. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but also some other things to keep in mind is that not only is a blockchain going to be disruptive on the back end, but you're seeing disruption happen on the front end with things like ubiquitous computing, with alternate reality and virtual reality, with sensors and smart sensors. And so there's lots of things that are happening so that the pain points of screens and thumbs are going away. On the middle tier, we're seeing a lot of the machine learning and the AI is fixing a lot of the static algorithms that we used to be used to. And a lot of times we can apply a smart contract to maybe retrofit some of that AI data. So there's a lot of ways that we can leverage blockchains within this model to be able to start really making key disruption or being the disruptor within our particular industries. So when we go ahead and take a look at the next slide here, so when I proposed these 3 projects to the engineering students at IUPUI, they were looking at these projects for their capstone projects. So this is kind of their coup de grace as they kind of finish up their degree, and it's over 2 semesters. So the first semester was last semester. Obviously, we were impacted from the COVID-19 outbreak, but these were the 3 projects that were proposed. One was on tracking, tracing fishery data using blockchains and IoT devices, kind of explain some of the concepts around that and different ways that they might use that technology together. Another one was using smart sensors and IoT devices to be able to find information that's happening on a particular construction site, and then how to integrate that with information that may be needed for that construction site for things like inspections, for deliveries and stuff like that. And then the third one was on pet ownership, so we could actually start to do track and trace and ownership of information that might be related to a living pet. So such things like what has it been fed, breeding information, all of the ownership information, all of the shot information, even post the pet. You could even have, you have the Seattle Slew prized horse or something. You could have that digital certificate that said that you are still the owner of that prized horse. So that probably has some inherent value to it. So that was the 3 projects that we proposed, and of those 3 projects, the first 2 were actually selected. So there were actually 7 different companies that proposed to 5 teams, and of the 5 teams, 2 of our projects were picked, and so really proud of that. So we've been helping them build out their projects, been doing some mentoring with them. The students have been coming to my local blockchain meetup here in Indianapolis. I've been helping them answer questions. Some of the things that we've done is help them to define the actors, figure out what some of those workflows look like, figure out where a blockchain might fit in that workflow, and then figure out how we can leverage existing technology without trying to reinvent the wheel. So those are some things that we've been working on together for those 2 projects. So let's look at the next slide here. And so that's pretty much it as far as the projects that we've been able to work together with David, along with some other projects that we've been working on that I'll let David kind of speak to. We've also been working on various other different education initiatives. So I'll hand that one on back over to David and Christy. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Tommy. And now we're going to be switching things over to our special guest from Portland State University. Thank you so much, Dr. Euthys, for attending here. And we've got your slides up here. And so I'm going to let you get started without any further ado. But my first kind of question off to you is tell us about your approaches and your successes and opportunities and barriers that you had when teaching blockchain, and please walk us through it.
Thank you, Anjan. Yes, it has been quite a journey. So I think that my colleague Stan Heister is on. I think he's Stan.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Okay, fantastic. Sorry, your video.
Sorry, guys, but I can't. Video preferences. It's just not giving me an option to use GoToMeeting to access my camera. So I'll be here, Christy, but I'll let you kind of drive.
Okay, great. And so yes, and so we're at Portland State University. So we started our blockchain program. We had a course or 2 before this, but we started our program, a big certificate program with 6 courses starting last fall. So we ran it for the first year, and then we're getting ready for the second year, revamping this summer. So part of the push, and Stan can speak more to this, part of the reason that we wanted to do this is the same thing that Anjan was talking about earlier. You know, there's so much incredible innovation and development and knowledge on the tech side, and there was so little on the business side. And we felt like those two groups really needed to be able to communicate with each other better. The business people, I mean, they understand business and they can be consultants, and some of the accounting consulting firms think you don't really need to understand blockchain to be a consultant, but we really don't agree with that. And we felt like, okay, the business people need to understand some tech, and we have some tech students who really needed to understand the business side. And so it's very much a collaborative program, and we work a little bit with the computer science department, helped us build it, and they teach parts of the program for us. So one more thing before we get to the challenges, though. When we looked at programs that were in existence, so there's a lot of programs online, even really good universities are putting online programs together, these online certificate programs, but it's very different than an academic program for reasons that I think both Tom and Anjan both explained. You know, you really need that interaction. You need to develop the tacit knowledge. You need hands-on work. You need to collaborate with people and discuss these concepts. They're complicated. But more than that, so what we saw was that there was a lot of information about fundamentals, the technical details or whatever about how blockchains work. And then there was a lot of information about use cases. So how they're using it in construction and fish tracing and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of information about that. But the middle piece about why would you do this? Why are companies collaborating with each other in this way? What is the business case? How are they going to create value, and how are they going to appropriate value that they create from these collaborations? So there's a lot of information about that in strategic alliance literature, and in business, we have lots of models for how this can work, but it just wasn't being applied in this area. And so that's what caused us to create the program in the way that we have. So Stan,
if I can add just a little bit about why we picked the School of Business as opposed to just the computer science group to kind of launch this certificate program is, and it was, I think Tom brought it up a little bit as well, and that is that, the adoption is going to be driven by the business need, and nobody understands business need more than business people, and we don't need developers developing in silos. What we need is a cross-developmental effort with business people understanding where the value add is, and of course developers understanding the technology. So what we've also found is that in many times in tech project teams, you've got a kind of a void between the CS or tech people and then the business people, and it's hard to sometimes get those two groups to communicate because there is a void in between those two in terms of being able to speak each other's language. We're getting business people up to speed to the point that they can understand the technology to a level where they can have those effective conversations with CS or the tech side. So that's one of the kind of gaps we're filling with our particular program and focused on the School of Business. We also partnered with the CS organization to teach one of our classes and help with some of the others as well. So that's just what I want to fill in on that first piece, kind of the last slide.
Did you want to do the challenges, Dan?
So, well, you talked a little bit about this. So the university models are challenges in and of itself. Any university is to get a university to even include one blockchain course is sometimes a problem because you're competing with others, and to get it done at a university level like we've done and made an 18 credit certificate program with 6 courses was even more difficult. And Christy played a large role in making that happen at the campus level. Plus, we had a lot of support from the president and even our the board at the Board of Regents. Faculty is another interesting game, and that is trying to find faculty with the expertise to deliver blockchain. Christy and I have done some research in blockchain, and what we found when we started doing some research and publishing with academic publications is that there aren't a lot of academics out there right now doing research and publishing. So trying to find somebody that's qualified to teach a course is also difficult. Christy and I teach 3 of the 6 courses, but then we had to find some others that were qualified in the area to help us, and we were able to do that through our board of advisors, which we'll talk about in a little bit. You can talk about the speed of change, the difference between academia and blockchain, Christy.
Oh, sure. And, and just one more thing about the challenges. Normally when you teach a new course, there are other courses, there's other universities doing such programs, there's other courses out there, there are textbooks or project materials, and there's none of that in blockchain. So it's really, try to get a faculty member to teach it, even if they know it. It's fine, it's just so much work to put together the materials sometimes. So you might plan a unit on interoperability or something at the beginning of the term, and by the time you get there, everything has changed and you're scrambling to get new materials. And so, so it's kind of a heavy lift for faculty. I mean, we've really enjoyed it and we've learned a ton going through it. And so, so now we've got a really good model in place that we're happy with, but it took some, blood and sweats to get there. So, but the speed of change, so academia is incredibly slow, as Stan mentioned. I mean, it can take a year just to change the name of a course or something like that. And so, as you know, a blockchain moves at breakneck speed. And so trying to balance those two things is definitely a challenge.
Next.
I'm just going to show you this. I don't know how many people are on the tech side and on the business side, but this is just a simple graphic of how you might see this from a business, a person's perspective. So on the left, we have 5 different companies that are involved. These happen to be banks and customers. Each one of those has their own specific ERP system. And when there's a transaction between the 2 of them, they each record it in their own system. And that creates a lot of problems. The timing might be different. There might be errors. A transaction might be missing. There are always a lot of problems with reconciliation. And then in addition, each company only has access to its own transactions unless it has specifically made arrangements with each individual partner that it's working with to connect systems together, ERP systems together. So that's a lot of work. On the right, we have the shared blockchain ledger, where each transaction is recorded only once and it's validated by both parties as it's recorded. And of course, it's immutable. So that becomes then sort of the single source of truth for these companies. And so there doesn't need to be all that reconciliation and disputes. And then auditors and regulators also can trust that data in the shared ledger. So it creates a lot of business advantages, both in writing valid transactions and then in having access to this much larger body of data that can be mined, and we can use our AI tools and all kinds of applications on the shared data. And it's just a very profoundly different model for business people. Even when we have an alliance, we typically form an alliance because the other party has resources or knowledge or relationships, experiences that we can use in our own business. And so the partners are trying to figure out what they can get from the other person. This is a different model in terms of we're co-creating, we're collaborating in a much more open and cooperative way than in the past. And it's very difficult to get business brains around that. So anyway, so this shared ledger view kind of just helps people see like, oh, that's what a blockchain is. It's simple. It's very simple. It's on top. It's not replacing anything. So we're just building it on top of systems that we already have. And so it's not such a heavy lift for a business, except for the coordination between those five companies, those 5 strategists, 5 sets of operation teams, 5 sets of tech people. It's a lot of work, just the coordination part. Okay.
So I can speak to this a little bit, Christian, then you can jump in. So our blockchain program is fully online. It was designed that way from the beginning because we not only wanted to reach Portland State students, both upper division undergrads, but also graduate students. But we also wanted this program, and it is open to professionals. So people in the industry and maybe people that aren't even in the Pacific Northwest. So We do have consultants, people that have been in the business world for quite a few years that are part of the program, and they bring in a lot of value to our undergraduate students, for example, who may not have a whole lot of business experience. So the combination of the professionals as well as undergrads and graduate students in the program has been very, very helpful for us. We also are different than industry training programs around blockchain, and there are a ton of them. So you can take a multitude of courses that you can find out there. Sometimes they're 4-hour courses, sometimes they're just several days, but they're basically passive learning opportunities. We're very high touch here at Portland State. We interact with the students, and we make it an applied sort of a program, and that's a very distinct difference. In fact, the applied projects really let the students take an idea that they have on their own and develop it into something that they can use perhaps in the future. One of our students launched a blockchain company and is now in the 3rd round of funding, and used one of the projects that we had in one of our courses to begin the workings of a white paper that they used to capture some funding down the road. So ours, again, very high touch. We also have created a student, I think this was very important, both a student organization as well as a very powerful board of advisors. You can see some of the companies that we partner with below. Some of those are also on our board of advisors, including Intel, Nike, Consensus, Constellation Networks. We're also partnered with, or we have boards with people on our board of advisors, Smith & Crown here in Portland, which is a consulting firm around blockchain, Everest, which is a startup, Columbia Sportswear. All of those companies help us understand what we should be developing around our curriculum, and what would make it important for them or for the students that come out of the program for them to be hired at those particular organizations. So partnering with the business community and the blockchain community has been hugely important for us.
Yeah, and I just want to put in a quick plug for SIMBA, because in one of our courses, it's easy to find materials to teach Solidity, and we use Azure Workbench, and we get into the code of the contracts, but it's really hard to get that business perspective, which SIMBA gives you without having to dig into those details. That has been just such a game changer for us. And so, and SIMBA Chain has been, and David WASSON have been like excellent partners for us, helping work through the details of our projects in real time as we're using those projects, and even talking to students and helping us. And really, it's such for anyone, I know there's some faculty members out there thinking about whether you should start a program, and it is such an enormously generous and collaborative community. All these experts were willing to help us from all kinds of different firms. I mean, SIMBA was instrumental in the business software part, but it's so generous, and it's really easy to get guest experts to come meet with your students. It's easy to get projects going. And so it's because it's so new and because it's so collaborative in nature anyway, it's just an excellent time to be starting a program like this. If you don't want to start your own program and you want to send students to ours, any student can join. They don't have to be Portland State students. We have a quick admit process, so that, mostly for these community member professionals, but they can get admitted quickly. Right now, that doesn't open until September 8th for next year, but if anyone's interested, we can save them a spot and get them ahead of the surge. And so, yeah, we start at the end of September, so we're a little later than a normal semester program. Okay.
So again, I can start with this one, Christine. You can fill in any holes. We first start off our program with a boot camp, which is there on the left-hand side, and that is kind of brings everybody up to the same speed so that they can speak the language. They understand what distributed ledger technology is. Christian and I developed that last summer, and it's a prereq for all of these courses. You can jump into the course either in the fall or in the winter. The spring courses are both, they have prerequisites, but so these are 18 credits. So each of these courses, the smaller ones are lab, or the smaller ones are 2-credit courses, such as the fundamentals lab in the fall, and the larger blocks are 4-credit classes. So we have, as you can see, 6 courses. 3 of them are labs, 3 of them are more content related, typical core college type of courses. So the labs are really important, as Christy mentioned, the hands-on nature and the fact that we're so applied in what we do. Wanted to make sure that, and one of the reasons we use SIMBA, which was we used SIMBA in the business lab in the winter, Christy and I did. They were very helpful there, as well as I think we used them a little bit in the spring as well with the emerging issues. But it gives the students an opportunity to kind of touch and see behind the scenes what's going on with the blockchain. So not only as a business student do you understand the business pieces of where blockchain is important, the use cases where it can add value and save money, but you can also understand a little bit about how these things are built. And that's what I mentioned earlier about us being able to talk then with the tech side of the business, because it fills that gap that sometimes exists between technology people and business people.
Right, and the way we organize it is we're pretty techy in the fall, we're pretty business focused in the winter. Spring, we bring it all together through the applications. And we can give you more details about any one of those classes if you're interested. David? Or whoever, Anjan, whoever's controlling the slides.
We got it. There you go.
Okay, thank you. And so in the future, so we had a really successful first year, and we're building on that for the future. And what we're doing this time is we're being even more integrative. I think that you guys have mentioned blockchain is hard, and blockchain has to be collaborative, and you really have to get that tacit knowledge. And so what we're trying to do is have real projects, but not real projects, just proof of concepts, real projects with community members this time. So we've got a Smart Campus initiative on our campus in Portland. It has got a Smart Cities initiative. And so we're working this summer to create a working blockchain program that students can interact with, so they can, they can analyze the data, and they can be part of the process of actually using a real blockchain throughout their studies as they're in our program. And so we're working on use cases. We don't have that finalized right now, but we'll have that done at the end of the summer. And then they'll also be engaged this year, both the students from our program, and also we have a student organization. They'll all be engaged in consulting this time. We've got mentors from last year, and we've got mentors from our business community. So in the fall, they'll be doing just kind of lunch and learns, like what is a blockchain and what can it do for your company and industry. And then for companies who want to move beyond that, we will do use case identification. We'll run them through the process of figuring out, what are some good uses, and kind of scope those out. And then in the spring, they'll select one of those and use that as proof of concept in the applications class. In addition to this, we started this last year, and we're going to be working more heavily with them this year. We work with this organization called the Oregon Enterprise Blockchain Venture Studio. It's an incubator accelerator kind of program for blockchain startups. So Stan and I worked with them, and sort of, some of our board members and things worked with them last year. But this year, we've figured out a way that we're going to get students more heavily involved, especially the grad students and community members more heavily involved with those startup companies. It's a great resource. We also, Stan and I run a Hyperledger meetup, and there's a lot of enterprise blockchain meetups in town that the students can get involved with. So we're really trying to get them both, networked with the community and working on real projects so that they can really apply the concepts to real projects and get that tacit knowledge going, and also build the networks that will help them in their careers. Okay, and then I think the last one.
So yeah, there's our website, pdx.edu/SBA/blockchain would give you general information on our blockchain program. We also have somebody that mans our email, incoming email stream. So if you do have questions and are interested in the program, feel free to use that, because not all the information you might need is readily apparent on the website. So feel free to email that particular email address. And one other thing we wanted to mention too is the boot camp we talked about earlier. We created for the program, but now we're actually launching that as a public offering as well on YouTube. So that should be able to be accessed. It's about, what is it, Christy, 4 hours or so of content where you watch some video, then you go out and do some research, and then you come back and do an assessment, maybe 5 or 10 quiz questions. So it's not just again a passive type of thing. You are watching a few videos of Christy and myself, and then you're going out and doing some research on your own. It will get you up to a certain level, and so again, that's available. It'll give you an opportunity to just see a little bit more about what our program is, because later in the boot camp we talk specifically about the program and how to get involved.
Okay, so that's us, that's our program, and we're quite proud of it, and we'd love to have you join us. If you've got minority students, please send them our way. We're really trying to beef that up too, as you know. So one of our big pushes at Portland State is social, environmental impact, in addition to the economic impact, and that runs through our courses. That was one of the driving factors, both for Stan and I. We were doing research in this area in blockchain for good, and so that was one of the reasons we wanted to start our program first. We were hoping that when we get copied, people will copy that component too. So as you may have seen from the news, Portland also is interested in social justice. Kind of the nature of our program and our people. So.
Thank you, Christy. That's and Stanton. That was fantastic. And I will make a point when the world is in a little bit different place, when I'm traveling out there to visit you when I'm out in Portland again, which hopefully will be not too far in the distant future, but maybe sometime in 2021. We did have one question before we move on to David. I did have one question that was asked by Corey. Do you offer your courses online or in person? How does that work?
Yeah, it's completely online and mostly async, because we do have students from, who are in India, and I think there was one student in Europe in one of the classes. Yeah, and so, and this year probably we'll have students from around the globe who weren't able to come back to the US, even if they're Portland students. So right, it's online, it's mostly async, although when we have expert guests, we do that weekly, we like to have the students there in person if they can. We record them and share them. But yeah, we designed it initially as a fully online program. We didn't just move online, because of COVID. So
sure. Okay. So you're online native. Great. Well, we're gonna move things over to David. Let's, if you give us 1 second to switch slide decks here and get back over to David. And David Wasson, I'll let you introduce yourself. But David is at SIMBA Chain, and he's the first time here on a SIMBA Chain webinar. So David, take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Anjan. So yeah, my name's David, and I am really been spending my time with business development in the education space. So, Christy and Stan have been a pleasure to work with at PSU. It's been really rewarding to see them roll out their business program for blockchain. And I've gotten to know some of their students too, which has really been fun to hear the testimonials firsthand from the students on how they've learned blockchain, and they've been able to visualize it and actually use it firsthand. So that's been great. But that's who I am. So you can just go to the next slide. So we've been working with Portland State. We're working with multiple universities. I'm not going to name them all right now, but we're working with universities and colleges. We're working with universities that don't have curriculums yet. We're actually working with some blockchain clubs, which is really fun too, to work with students directly. And we're also working with some blockchain specific membership organizations that are encouraging entrepreneurialism, and they're also teaching blockchain to in some instances they're teaching it to urban youth in what they call opportunity rich communities. So we're working with some nonprofits. And so given all that, I just wanted to say a few words about what those organizations are utilizing from SIMBA and what we're offering in that space. So the first thing, and then after that, we'll go straight to questions and answers. So I'll keep this brief, but the basic proposition really is that SIMBA provides an easy to understand tool for students to experience what it's actually like to build a smart contract and deploy an application on a real, as Christy said, a real blockchain platform. So I think what's super beneficial about that is that these tools really don't require or have the need to have knowledge of coding or programming in order to use them. So we also help instructors with training and mentoring. And when I say that, what we do is we try to train the trainer on how to use SIMBA for their specific coursework that they've designed, but how they can fit SIMBA into that. We also offer curriculum planning, and basically that's just showing the best way to integrate SIMBA tools into the course or lab programs that you've designed. We also help with business use cases. We don't actually design a business use case, but we will help kind of with the use case relational business flows and how that fits into the use case itself. Then we've also developed our own educational materials for use in curriculums. We've designed, in fact, Tommy's designed a really good portal for blockchain courses where you can pick up material. And it's not SIMBA material, it's blockchain topics. And it really helps learning things like terminology and the definitions of different terminology used in blockchain, use case examples. It even has flashcards, quizzes. So it's good learning information that you can incorporate into your curriculums and into your labs. And then lastly, we do offer instruction augmentation services, and that's really where we don't teach economics, we don't teach law, we don't teach finance. But we know a lot about blockchain and how you can use the tool to teach those courses. So we can actually augment your teaching and instruction with someone from our team helping with the blockchain piece. So that's really it. That's all I just wanted to say, what we're doing in the education space with blockchain and SIMBA chain. And so, Anjan, I'll give it back to you for questions and answers, I guess.
Oh, sorry, I was muted. All right, thank you, David. That was very helpful, as you always are, and succinct and to the point. I'm going to hand things over. We're going to take a couple questions. We've got about 10 minutes, but if there's no reason we can't necessarily stay on, but longer than that, if there is interest from the community. But one question that I wanted to start things off with to everybody, Michael Burns asked this back at the top of the hour. What kind of a person, this is you might not be prepared for this, what kind of person makes for a good or appropriate blockchain student? So I'll leave that. I'm going to put the floor to anyone who wants to take that. And hopefully at least one of you will be willing to take that. But what makes for a good blockchain student or a good candidate?
Tommy, you can go first.
Okay, sure. I think the most important thing for someone that wants to learn blockchain is, it depends on how much depth you want to go. If you just want to use blockchain to retrofit what you're already doing, then if you have a good passion for that, then I think that's the most important thing, is just have passion for either your business process or for the data that you're dealing with, and have a passion for why you need a blockchain for that. So you have to answer those questions. Do you need a blockchain, first of all, obviously, and then once you figure that out, then you should have a passion for why you're doing that. So for instance, if you're looking to a blockchain to have your medical records, well, there's a good reason behind that. So that's a very admirable cause. So I think passion is definitely going to be a big driving factor.
Okay.
I would definitely agree with the passion perspective, because sometimes our students stumble on, they just need an extra elective or something, take a class just on accident. And, but most of the students that are in there are truly very passionate about it. So they're sharing resources. I mean, there's always new podcasts, or there's some cool new use case that somebody hears about. So we've got ways for them to really share a lot of resources. And actually at the end of the program, they create a learning plan for themselves to, like, how are they going to stay current in their own, because most of our students are either MBA type students, or we have a new master's program that's a data science that builds with the blockchain program. Anyway, so they've got that, or we've got undergrad accounting or supply chain finance students. So they all have kind of different needs. They can't all learn the same thing or go the same direction. And so they're excellent at sharing resources, and they all develop this passion. I mean, they might come in thinking, no, blockchain's not that big a deal. I'll learn a little bit about it. It's something new. And then they realize, wow, this is really going to affect my industry. I really need to be ahead of this and be on top of it. It might not be for a few years, 5, 10 years maybe, but it's happening. And so even when they don't have the passion to begin with, most of them develop a lot of passion for it as they go.
Yeah, if I can add just one thing to that, Chrissy, and that is our best students, they seem to be the ones that are they're engaged because of their passion. As Tom mentioned, that they're heavily engaged. We do have we do a couple of competitions throughout the year. In fact, we've had teams that have won we've had a couple teams that have won national competitions, and we're runners up in another national competition that we had recently this year with the Air Force, the U.S. Air Force. So to be engaged, and we try to keep them active and other ways, not just in classroom, but also in student organizations and competitions and those sorts of things.
Yeah, great. Thank you. All those are great. If I'll add my 2 cents, I mean, obviously passion is a key attribute. I would add imagination. And willingness to try stuff, because and those two are probably correlated with each other. But in anything that you're in the early adoptive stages, you need to try things, and you need to be willing to do what design thinkers call the divergent thinking. Put ideas out there, give it a shot, collaborate. Which is part of imagination. So, collaborative and imagination would be kind of, 2 things that I'd say, is, makes for someone who's going to succeed in this discipline, and both for themselves as well as contribute to the broader community and the broader ecosystem. So, maybe another one I'd say is, being willing to and interested in trying different things, and experimenting with other disciplines, wearing another cap, playing a different persona. Again, these are probably lessons that exist outside of blockchain. They're probably helpful in other disciplines, but they're particularly helpful within blockchain. When we talk about hyper collaboration, it's a hyper collaborative discipline. It is, collaboration is a good quality to have. It'll lead you to success in life in many places, but it's really important with blockchain. So those are my 2 cents. So I hope, Michael, thanks for the question, Michael. I hope you found that helpful. For another question, I wanted to also just say right up, because this always gets asked sometimes frequently, is will you provide a recording of this webinar? The answer is yes and yes. Give us a couple days, maybe several days, and you'll have it'll be available on the SIMBA Chain YouTube channel. So just go to YouTube and Google SIMBA Chain. It'll be there. We will send that out to everyone who registered for this. So if you're here, you will get that in an email, probably in a not too distant future. And we are building a location on our website where we can view an archive of all our webinars, so you don't have to go to our YouTube channel. But we haven't built that yet, but that should be up, pretty shortly, probably the next few weeks. But on YouTube, you'll be able to get it the next few days. Another question I did want to ask is, this would probably be it's from Michael, and I'm going to guess this is going to be for David. What are your thoughts on, and are there on low-code platforms that take the friction out of learning? This is also from Michael Burns. David, do you have any thoughts on that? Obviously, some obvious answers here, but what type of blockchain trade provides the least amount of friction for new learners? That's where are there low-code or no-code approaches available for non-programmers to dip their toe into and acclimate to some of the big picture opportunities out there? So I'll leave that to both David and as well as our friends from Portland State.
Yeah, I would just say I'm trying to stay somewhat agnostic, but SIMBA Chain has a drag and drop user interface that you can literally build your business process, different business elements and the relationships between those in a visual kind of Visio format. And the beautiful part about that is you can toggle over and you're seeing the code generated. And then you can use that code from the smart contract to develop your app and then deploy it to a blockchain. So like for me personally, I mean, I have a degree in economics. I've been in business development my whole career, and I've been talking about blockchain since 2016, but it wasn't until I tried this low code solution, really it's almost no code solution, where I was able to visualize what the blockchain was, what a smart contract was, how that fit into an application, and then interact with like to visualize it, to read about it, or to study it is one thing, but to actually do it. But yes, it's very easy to use, and I think those are really beneficial to learning.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. SIMBA is the only one we know of that allows you to do that. And I feel like in our experience over the last year, we've moved more toward the business side and away from the deep tech side. When we first started, we thought, students need to understand every single consensus mechanism. They need to understand these interoperability platforms and how all the details, the technological details worked in order to really understand. But we're moving away from that. I mean, we still have that in our curriculum, but the emphasis is definitely on just like, how are you going to use this to solve business problems and create value? And SIMBA Chain allows you to just get there, like on day one. It's so simple to get started and see what you can do. So, I mean, it helps to have a little bit of database background, I think, to kind of understand the modeling. You definitely don't have to code to be able to do it.
I would agree with both of those two, and I would add that it helps to remove a lot of the ambiguity that happens from the business professional trying to hand something off to that tech guy, because you're still going to need a tech guy to review the code after it's created. But now there's not so much confusion in what is really being asked from that tech team. And you're kind of bridging the gap and allowing them to start to be able to communicate on that same sheet of music. And using an easy to use tool set to bridge that gap, I think really helps.
Yeah. And let me ask, that's great. Thanks everyone. We'll take 2 more questions here. The one I did want to say, because this comes up, what is the how do you get students and other stakeholders to see blockchain as other than cryptocurrency, and to what extent have you encountered that? So this is an amalgamation of several questions that have been asked, and it's a common one. So love to get your take on that to the panel.
Yeah, I can chime in at the beginning for the we talk about obviously the beginnings of blockchain and Bitcoin, but we're really focused on enterprise blockchain. So not even so much public blockchains and permissionless blockchains, but more enterprise oriented. So we make a distinction early on in our program. In fact, I think in the boot camp early on, we talk about the difference between the two. If you're interested in cryptocurrency and investing and speculating and that sort of thing, that's a whole different ballgame. We quickly move past that in our program. I don't know, Chris, if you want to add to that.
Yeah, I think even, I wish we could just call our program, exponential technologies or something like that, business, and just eliminate the word blockchain, because that does, that image, partly because of the ICO bubble and all that stuff, people still go, oh, blockchain, I don't want to go into that yet. There's still some fear and there's still a lot of misconceptions. So it is hard to get past that. I mean, we do have, in our Masters of Finance, we do have a fintech, DeFi, crypto class. So we do that, which is kind of outside of our mainstream program. It's important, it's available, especially in finance. It's really important to understand those topics. But I think it's a matter of time. So right now people are afraid of it, but pretty soon it'll be just mainstream. And I've heard businesses say, even in their blockchain labs, they don't call it blockchain when they're introducing it to the business partners. They just say it's a collaborative database project. So
yeah, great.
Yeah.
Any Tommy and David, you want to add that, or
yeah, I would just add one thing. I speak to universities every day, so some of the resistance points or friction points that I get from universities, especially the people that want to instruct it, is that I'm going to get pushback when I take this to the administrators, because it's Bitcoin, it's Silk Road, it's got all these connotations. But so making based on real world application, like use cases, and taking a use case from a business plan all the way through to an application, I think really helps in making it a real world situation. And then the other thing too, though, is that hype and that Bitcoin and the crypto and all that, that's kind of part of the lesson. It's part of the education process, because you can't just ignore it. It did happen, it exists. So it's kind of part of how we got to blockchain. So So I think both pieces are kind of important, but you need to keep your head in the real world when it comes to the blockchain education, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah,
great.
we've noticed sometimes, people just really are not aware of all the, sometimes business people we talk to really don't even understand what a blockchain is still, or many people still don't. So, but once they see how many active use cases there are and huge ones, then, then that overcomes that barrier. Like, oh, I got to get on the boat. I'm getting behind here.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a, I don't normally share this joke, but I'll go ahead and give it a shot. I have a joke that says crypto or Bitcoin is the worst thing that happened to blockchain. That's going to raise a lot of eyebrows, including my colleagues, probably right on this panel. Obviously, it's sarcastic because if it wasn't because of Bitcoin, nobody would have heard of blockchain. On the other hand, it has focused the imagination and constrained the our collective imaginations in a very specific way. And that is and that is unfortunate. So there was a cost to that opportunity that Bitcoin and crypto gave to blockchain, because none of us probably would have heard of it. I certainly wouldn't have. It means that a very, very narrow and very specific community has been most attracted to it. It tends to be the financial markets trading people. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I was a stockbroker 5 careers ago, but it means that it's a very specific, it's given it a very specific brand and community. And so it's the broader blockchain community has been trying to claw out of that. And so it's taken a little time. So there was a cost to that opportunity that crypto gave us that we're dealing with. So obviously it's not meant as a literal joke, but more of a commentary. I'm going to end with, I'm going to take a moderator's privilege and take the last question here, and because I'm going to answer it. And the question is from our friend Michael here. Michael Burns, thank you for all your questions. And sorry we did not get to everyone's questions. There are some that I know were directed for very specific panelists that weren't necessary, probably best for the whole community. And we will be getting back to you, to everyone. But Michael asked, Mr. Burns asked, what are the AI, artificial intelligence use cases, or AI-oriented use cases for blockchain? And I think this is really important to speak to, because, SIMBA Chain, we have spoken about this, written about this. I personally wrote a blog post on this about 7 months ago at the beginning of the year. And we're seeing a very fast emerging use case for blockchain and AI is blockchain really being the validated data layer for AI, your deep learning neural networks, and all your kind of big data analytics. So what I think may happen, and we're already seeing this starting to happen, is in this area of not just big data, but really, really, really big data, where you don't necessarily even need more, you just need better data. And what blockchain gets you is moving from big data to better data as an input into your AI, ML algorithms and deep learning algorithms, so that you have this validated layer, and it's really about refining the fuel that goes into those algos. And so what we may end up seeing is, the use cases for blockchain as they expand, people won't even call it blockchain in some cases, in many cases. And in this case, blockchain may just become ubiquitous and universal inside the lower end data engineering layer of your analytics platforms. That will probably eventually become a given, and you won't even have to mention it. Similar to what Tommy, you said earlier about Web 3.0, where it just evolves into blockchain just being a given on the back end. You're talking about web applications, Web 3.0, and so and it will become a given to the data engineering layers of your big data analytics and AI and machine learning algorithms and other types of use cases, higher level use cases you see around everything from autonomous vehicles to predictive models and forecasting. So with that, I think that's like, if I had to give a final kind of takeaway here from listening to all of you very smart people, it's that be passionate, be imaginative, and see that it's not just crypto, that it applies everywhere, and eventually it'll just be a ubiquitous given, be it in AI or any other use cases. So with that, I don't want to keep anyone, but real special thanks to our professors from Portland State, and Stanton and Christy. Thank you so much for your time here, and thank you all for listening, and we'll see you next time.